Amen. Thank you for that. And turn with me, please, to Judges chapter 14. Judges 14. I remember one of the things when I first became a Christian as a young adult, my 20s, someone challenged me with reading the Bible all the way through, which is a great challenge to give to people. It's a great challenge to challenge yourself with. There's no reason why every year you can't at least read your Bible through once. You say, well, how much is that? That's a big book. What do you mean? What do you mean every year? You know how many chapters you have to do that? 3. You have to read 3 chapters a day, average size chapters, to read your Bible all the way through once in a year. And I just thought, wow, that's so much. It's really not. And I'll prove that to you because in church today we're going to read 3 chapters. And you're like, oh, in one church service. Well, next service, maybe I'll preach all service on one verse, okay? But today we're going to go through 3 chapters. Why? They're all about the same guy, Samson. Samson. A couple weeks back, we had an introduction to Samson. We had the before Samson was born part. Samson was a judge who was promised by an angel to his parents. And he actually, it seemed like he had parents that cared. It seemed like he had spiritual parents that had some spiritual understanding. They even asked the angel, what are we going to do with this boy? And so on and so forth. And it turns out that Samson, the child of promise, kind of has some problems. And we're going to look through those. Each chapter has a different one. But it's funny when you look at books or movies about Samson, they all make him kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's like, tell the Philistines I'll be back. You know, he's like this massive. But here's the thing. Part of me thinks Samson was actually just a skinny kid. I don't know any of that for a fact. How is it that he beat up all these people in the Philistines? Was it because he was so huge? It was because the power of God fell on him. Part of me thinks, just the way I know my God works, he isn't going to use the toughest guy to win, the biggest guy to win every battle, is he? Or we wouldn't have the David and Goliath story, would we? I have a feeling Samson, he might have just been an average guy. He might have been a pipsqueak. I don't think he was Arnold Schwarzenegger. God was trying to get glory through his life and show his strength. And sadly, what Samson did so many times is take God's glory and God's power for granted. But let's start off in chapter 14. Samson went down to Timnath and saw a woman in Timnath of the Philistines, of the daughters of the Philistines. He came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore, get her for me to wife. Then his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among the daughters of thy brethren, or among all my people, that thou go to take a wife of the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, Get her for me, for she pleaseth me well. But his father and his mother knew not that it was of the Lord, that he sought an occasion against the Philistines, for at that time the Philistines had dominion over Israel. Now it's interesting, so you kind of have the seen part and you have the unseen part, right? God decided, I am going to use, spoiler alert, Samson to get some defeat over the Philistines who were getting dominion over Israel. And one of the ways he's going to do that is through this marriage. But I will say that, so that's the unseen part. Now the seen part is, Samson kind of seems like a spoiled brat. Get her for me? Snap. Hey, mama, dada. Right? And they're like, and they have concerns, right? They have cultural and religious concerns. And so, no, don't matter about your concerns. She pleaseth me well. Is that like, sit down and tell me why you're interested in my daughter. Sit down and tell me why you think this would be a good marriage. You know, kids these days. But, so here's the thing. Just because God had a purpose in something doesn't actually give Samson the right to be a spoiled brat, right? So that's kind of what we need to understand. Samson doesn't need to get an excuse out of this. So God's trying to do a work. Verse 5, Then went Samson down, and his father and his mother, to Timnath, and came to the vineyards of Timnath. And behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid, a baby lamb. You can, in your mind, I'm almost having cartoon images right now of, baby lamb and big lion, right? It's ridiculous. It's something that no human should be able to do. What's interesting about this, he told not his father or his mother what he had done. And he went down and talked with the woman, and she pleased Samson well. And after a time he returned to take her. He turned aside to see the carcass of the lion, and behold, there was a swarm of bees and honey in the carcass of the lion. So something very unique. And he took thereof in his hands and went on eating, and came to his father and mother, and gave them, and they did eat. But he told not them that he had taken the honey out of the carcass of the lion. If he had told you where he got that honey, would you have eaten it? No. Okay, we're still setting up. He's keeping this strange occurrence to himself. He's going to use it. I'm wondering if he knew at the wedding feast what was coming up, and he was preparing this for that reason. Let's look at verse 10. So his father went down unto the woman, and Samson made there a feast, for so used the young men to do. And it came to pass, when they saw him, that they brought 30 companions to be with him. Now the friends come out. I don't have enough friends. Throw a barbecue. Anyway, so Samson said unto them, I will now put forth a riddle unto you. If you can certainly declare it me within the 7 days of the feast, and find it out, then I will give you 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. But if you cannot declare it me, then shall ye give me 30 sheets and 30 changes of garments. And they said unto him, Put forth the riddle, that we may hear it. Now, by the way, I'm not for gambling. I'm not for betting. For something fun, over the table with your family members, play some games. I don't care about that. This is all we got to put money. Everything's betting now. This isn't in my notes. This must be good. I don't think you should be given what God gave you and throw it out there on bets. Now, to them, this is to the group. This is a good bet. If we mess up, each one of us has to come up with one to give to Samson. But if he messes up, he's going to have to come up with 30 all by himself. So they said, Put forth the riddle. And he said unto them, Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness, and they could not in 3 days expound the riddle. And it came to pass on the 7th day that they said unto Samson's wife, Entice thy husband, that he may declare on us the riddle, lest we burn thee and thy father's house with fire. Have ye not called us to take that we have? Is it not so? And so that took a dark turn, right? And by the way, so can anything in the betting world take a dark turn. If he had never made that bet, this never would have happened. So her life is on the line now. But instead of telling him, wouldn't you, by the way, don't try to solve all your problems in secret without talking to the one you love. Talk things through with the one you love. So Samson's wife wept before him and said, Thou dost but hate me and lovest me not. Thou hast put forth a riddle unto the children of my people, and hast not told it me. And he said unto her, Behold, I have not told it my father nor my mother. Shall I tell it thee? And she wept before him the 7 days while their feast lasted. That sounds nice. 7-day marriage feast, and the woman I'm about to marry is bawling all week long. Are you kidding? And it came to pass on the 7th day that he told her, because she lay sore upon him, and she told the riddle to the children of her people. And the men of the city said unto him on the 7th day before the sun went down, What is sweeter than honey, and what is stronger than a lion? Now, so it was impossible for them to know. It was impossible for them to know. And so he said unto them, it's a real lovely little family here, If ye had not plowed with my heifer, ye had not found out my riddle. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and slew 30 men of them and took their spoil and gave changes of garments unto them, which expounded the riddle. And his anger was kindled, and he went up to his father's house. But Samson's wife was given to his companion, whom he had used as his friend. Okay, now, God will use people sometimes, and it bewilders. Like, I don't know why right now God is using Samson, other than in a lot of ways, maybe he's just doing all this in simplicity, right? And you can be a rough around the edges kind of person, and God can still use you. The point is to grow through being used. Basically, he takes all this lying and back and forth, and he goes and he wipes out a garrison of soldiers and takes their uniforms and uses it to pay off his bet. I'm kind of like, why didn't you just wipe out those guys? But anyway, so I don't like weird. Like you think things should go differently sometimes than they do. Sometimes you can't figure it out. But look now. So now Samson's wife is then given away as a wife to one of his other friends. You're like, what is happening? It's just like how godless and messed up cultures can be, right? I'm shocked and awed with each passing year at how Western culture goes off the godless and pagan cliff with every year. Like the stuff that you used to just kind of, quietly joke about now is like a crime to say things about certain people of certain persuasions that live really godless lives, but that's the accepted, and you judging them as evil, and it just... Be ready. Be ready. You don't know. You can't trust in culture. I want to say that. As much as like Samson wanted to have these friends, they were never really his friends. The Lord is the best friend you'll ever have. And the best friends you'll ever find are in his church. Okay? Don't be out there making friends of the Philistines. It won't go well. Let's jump into chapter 15. Came to pass within a while after, in the time of wheat harvest, that Samson visited his wife with a kid. Said, I will go into my wife, into the chamber. But her father would not suffer him to go in. And her father said, I verily thought that thou hadst utterly hated her. Therefore I gave her to thy companion. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. And Samson said concerning them, Now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure. And Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and took firebrands, and turned tail to tail, and put a firebrand in the midst between the two tails. And when he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines, and burnt up both the shocks and also the standing corn with the vineyards and olives. Then the Philistines said, Who hath done this? And they answered, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he had taken his wife and given her to his companion. They instantly knew why. They instantly knew why he did this. They knew that what they had done was wrong. And the Philistines came up and burnt her and her father with fire. And Samson said unto them, Though yet ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease. And he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. And he went down and dwelt in the top of the rock of Etam. And so basically you can see what happens as a little bet turns into violence and anger and bad feelings and bad decisions and back and forth one-upmanship. And I'm going to get you for this, and I'm going to get you for this, I'm going to get you for this. But Samson really hasn't done anything wrong. In the law of the Wild West out here, I mean, he's taking vengeance on his enemies in each case when they've done him wrong. He's not, and by the way, I don't know that, can I say that Samson is doing this as a judge of Israel? Or is this personal? Well, whatever reason it was for him, God was using it. God was using it. In each case, the Philistines are taking a punch in the mouth from this one lone guy. Let's look on to the rest of the chapter. The Philistines went up and pitched in Judah and spread themselves in Lehi. The men of Judah said, "Why are ye come up against us?" And they answered, "To bind Samson are we come up, to do to him as he hath done to us." Then 3,000 men of Judah went to the top of the rock of Etam and said to Samson, "Knowest thou that the Philistines are rulers over us? What is this that thou hast done unto us?" And he said unto them, "As they did unto me, so have I done unto them." Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. That's his motto. And they said unto him, "We are come down to bind thee, that we may deliver thee into the hands of the Philistines." And Samson said unto them, "Swear unto me that you will not fall upon me yourselves." And they spake unto him, saying, "No, but we will bind thee fast and deliver thee into their hand. But surely we will not kill thee." And they bound him with 2 new cords and brought him up from the rock. And when he came from Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. And the cords that were upon his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bands loosed from off his hands. And he found a new jawbone of an ass, because an old one just wouldn't do, and put forth his hand and took it and slew 1,000 men therewith. And Samson said, "With the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jaw of an ass have I slain 1,000 men. And it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking, that he cast away the jawbone out of his hand, and called that place Ramath Lehi. And he was sore athirst, and called on the Lord, and said, "Thou hast given..." Oh, wait, what's happening? Samson calls on the Lord. Finally. You know, God will put you through some stuff. Why? He wants you to call on him. But thou hast given this great deliverance unto the hand of thy servant, and now shall I die for thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised. But God clave an hollow place that was in the jaw, and there came water thereout. And when he had drunk, his spirit came again, and he revived. Wherefore he called the name thereof Enhakkore, which is in Lehi unto this day. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. Okay, bam. So there's chapter 15. He has a big slaughter early in the chapter, back and forth, because they burned up his wife and her father. And so, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But his own people take him captive. Say, "Come on, Samson, you're going to get us in trouble. The Philistines are our captors." You know, instead of this one guy just took out like that garrison of 30 in Ashtaroth, and now it doesn't say here how many he killed, but a bunch of people that he killed again. And so instead of like, maybe we have a judge here, maybe there's something that we could band together and do here, like has happened with all the other judges. They say, "No, we're going to turn you over to the popo." Basically, we're going to turn you over. Oh, it's awful. What a sad day for Israel. But he lets his own people bind him. And we have the slaughter of 1,000 men. In a moment, God turns, like there's this whole massive army of the Philistines ready to make Samson pay publicly, and he takes them all out. Did he think he could? Did he care? Did he just react in the moment? I don't know. There's not a lot that tells us right now about the heart of Samson. Samson to me just seems like such a fleshly, reactionary person, but it's still lining up with God's will for Israel, so it's still working out. You know, it's so funny. Sometimes people think like, well, things worked out, so I was right. Well, no, it might not have had anything to do with you at all. It might have had to do with God had a plan, and you were there for the ride. It's kind of how I feel it's going. But God is enabling Samson and using him despite himself. And I just imagine if he had, you know, at this point, like Gideon blows a trumpet, right? And that was the thing for Israel. If there was a leader like that, this would have been Samson's place to blow the trumpet and gather some tribes, and they could have known, we've got something going here. But instead, he still just kind of keeps it all to himself, just kind of keeps it all internal. And boy, when you've got something, you've got these great and precious promises, you've got the truth, you've got the power of God, you shouldn't just keep it to yourself. You should start to put that out and share that with others. I just imagine what if he had made some speeches, if he had done some praying, if he had tried to rally, if he had blown that trumpet, we could have seen such a great, how much more could have been done, I guess, is my point. Because let's see to the downfall of Samson. Let's go right into chapter 16. Then went Samson to Gaza, and saw there an harlot, and went in unto her. And it was told the Gazites, saying, Samson is come thither. And they compassed him in, and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all the night, saying, in the morning, when it is day, we shall kill him. Samson lay till midnight, and arose at midnight, and took the doors of the gate of the city, and the 2 posts, and went away with them, bar and all, and put them upon his shoulders, and carried them up to the top of an hill that is before Hebron. And now, so it sounds like he took the very hiding place where all these people were hiding, and just marched him up on top of a hill and walked away. I mean, again, something that shouldn't have been possible. And it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Now, this is the famous name that you're used to hearing when we study Samson and Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her, and said unto her, entice him, and see wherein his great strength lieth, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him. And we will give thee, every one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah is a plant. They know that the Samson's heart's all about the ladies, has been from the beginning. We'll get a pretty lady. We'll get her to, blink her eyes and say nice things and pat his shoulder, play some nice music, make him some nice food, and get him to talk about this, and we can find the secret. So that's poor Samson, doesn't see it coming. Delilah said to Samson, tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. And Samson said unto her, if they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak, and be as another man. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green withs, which had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. And then she said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he brake the withs, as a thread of tow is broken when it toucheth the fire. I don't know what a thread of tow is, but I have seen thread hit fire, and it burns right out. So his strength was not known. And Delilah said unto Samson, behold, thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Now tell me, I pray thee, wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, if they bind me fast with new ropes that never were occupied, then shall I be weak, and be as another man. Delilah therefore took new ropes, and bound him therewith, and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And there were liers in wait, abiding in the chamber, and he brake them off his arms like a thread. And Delilah said unto Samson, hitherto thou hast mocked me, and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be bound. And he said unto her, if thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web. And now it's getting closer to the truth, isn't it? I'm not there yet, but the more you fool around with this stuff, the closer you get. She fastened it with the pin, and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awaked out of his sleep, and went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. She said unto him, now this is kind of the key to this that I want you to get. How canst thou say, I love thee, when thine heart is not with me? Thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and hast not told me wherein thy great strength lieth. And it came to pass, when she pressed him daily with her words, and urged him, so that his soul was vexed unto death. And he told her all his heart, and said unto her, there hath not come a razor upon mine head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. All right, so let's talk about this last section, the build-up here. If we talk about Delilah, Delilah here is a picture of sin. Samson is a picture of a child of God toying with sin. And the longer you allow yourself to be under the urges and influences, and what does it say here? Daily pressings and urgings with her words. The longer you allow yourself to be under that influence, the more likely you are to crack. Child of God. You can't mess around with sin. Can't play with it. Can't fool with it. Can't think, I own this sin. I can beat this sin. I can beat this sin anytime. I can quit anytime I want, says the pack-a-day smoker. Right? I have control. This won't affect me too much. Pressed him daily. Urged him daily. Got into his heart and disarmed him. Verse 18, and when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up this once, for he hath showed me all his heart. And the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and brought money in their hand, and she made him sleep upon her knees. And she called for a man. She caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him. And she said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he awoke out of his sleep, and said, I will go out as at other times before, and shake myself. And he wist not that the Lord was departed from him. That's the thing about playing with sin too long. You don't understand when the Lord's spirit and blessing and power has departed. He doesn't realize that his hedge of protection is gone until it's too late. And by the way, he didn't even really know where his strength comes from. His strength didn't come from his hair. It's from the reason he had hair was in obedience to God's word, in obedience to the Nazirite vow. And so because of obedience to the word, he had long hair, but his strength was obedience to the word, it wasn't the hair. The hair represents an obedient walk with God under the vow of a Nazirite. The strength is the Spirit of God, not ceremony, ritual, or carnal observances. So the Philistines took him, put out his eyes, brought him down to Gaza, bound him with fetters of brass, and he did grind in the prison house. Howbeit, the hair of his head began to grow again after he was shaven. Then the lords of the Philistines gathered them together for to offer a great sacrifice unto Dagon their god, and to rejoice. For they said, our God hath delivered Samson our enemy into our hand. And when the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God hath delivered into our hands our enemy, and the destroyer of our country, which slew many of us. And it came to pass that when their hearts were merry, that they said, call for Samson, that he may make us sport. There's always something about this heart of the victor that just rejoices in the downfall and the abasing of their enemies. And boy, I don't want that heart. I want to see God's victories, but I don't want to see anybody go through anything. But they wanted to see Samson go through it. They called out Samson out of prison house. He made them sport, and they set him between the pillars. And Samson said unto the lad that held him by the hand, suffer me that I may feel the pillars whereupon the house standeth, that I may lean upon them. Now the house was full of men and women, and all the lords of the Philistines were there, and there were upon the roof about 3,000 men and women that beheld while Samson made sport. That's just on the roof. How many are inside? I mean, what a structure. What a building. 2 great big pillars in the middle to hold the whole thing up. And Samson called upon the Lord and said, O Lord God. He calls upon God again. Remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, that I may be at once avenged of the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars upon which the house stood, and on which it was borne up, of the one with his right hand and of the other with his left. And Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all his might, and the house fell upon the lords and upon all the people that were therein. So the dead which he slew at his death were more than they which he slew in his life. Then his brethren and all the house of his father came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the burying place of Manoah his father. And he judged Israel 20 years. So he never raised an army. He never led men in battle. He won battles, but he was so low. So low. Everything my way. Everything my rules. Friends, that's not a good way to live. That's not a good way to live. His constant desire for women and appeasing of his flesh and his focus on his self became a self-absorbed, self-reliant person instead of a God-absorbed, God-reliant person. This seems like a repentant prayer, but it's a sad prayer. It's a sad prayer. I'd rather God use my life than my death. When I look at this prayer, I see someone who's wants revenge. And I get it. You're a prisoner. They've taken your eyes. If you go all the way back, they took your wife and your holdings, and your own people turned you in, and I can understand. But I just don't see grace in Samson's life. But here's the thing. Friends, God will use us one way or another. I just think of how much more Samson could have been used. As Christ stretched out his arms on the cross, said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I see Samson stretch out his arms and say, avenge me. Yeah. The life of Samson, I think, is summed up by this. You can't toy with sin. Giving in to temptation leads to sin. Hanging out with Delilah long term is a bad idea. God will use sinful men to fulfill his will, but that doesn't make them right. And ultimately, there's a consequence for sin, and there's a better way than doing it alone. Let's have every head bowed and every eye closed, please.